Hello and welcome to another episode of Father and Joe. I'm Joe Rocky here with Father Boniface Hicks. And Father, in our last episode, you were discussing kind of what the meaning of Catholic was and how it means universal. And the thought had been coming to me about how in the rest of society in general, when we try to do the term universal, it's almost like a race to the bottom in terms of a common denominator, which oftentimes waters something down, makes it less effective, um, and just generally not good. So I put that in pure contrast to the Catholic Church, where Catholic being universal, where it's actually does apply to each person and actually does apply in a meaningful way. If you follow the rules of the faith, you end up having a better life. Is it necessarily an easy life? No, because anything that's worth getting takes some work and some effort. It takes work to deny sin at the end of the day. So I wanted to use this episode to kind of highlight why, or I guess how, the church has become universal and why that is meaningful and applicable to all of us. Because when we think of other entities or religions, many of them kind of say clustered to one geographical area and didn't spread across the world. And I have to believe that part of the universality of the faith is a reason for that. So I want to give you a chance to take over from there and guide us in the right direction.
Well, we take our cue from God, who came to us in Jesus Christ, that all men might be saved and come to the knowledge of truth, as St. Paul says. And Jesus prayed also that his blood would be shed for those present, the apostles, and for many, and that many is understood as being universal. The church developed her universal mission early on with St. Peter being drawn to preach the gospel to Cornelius, the centurion, and baptized his family as he saw the Holy Spirit fall upon them after having a dream that all foods would be made clean and all persons in that sense would also be made clean and be available for baptism. St. Paul developed that mission and became the apostle to the Gentiles and developed a whole theology of understanding around that. And so from the origin, the church was universal. Of course, Jesus also in the resurrection said that preach the gospel to all creatures, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. And then he also sent them forth, go and make disciples of all nations, nations being the Gentiles. So that's just what the word Gentile means is nation. So go and preach the gospel to all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. And so the universal call of Christianity originates in God himself and his desire to transform everyone and bring all of us to salvation and the knowledge of truth. And then how did that get lived out? That's where we see the spread of Christianity immediately to the farthest reaches of the world, far east, going all the way into China in the first centuries of the church and into India, and then also into the West, spreading throughout Europe. St. Paul got all the way to Spain, which was kind of the western boundary of the known world at that time, and certainly down into Africa. And the gospel was brought to the farthest reaches of the world, minus the Americas, which were a bit far away from everything at that time, requiring a bit longer ship journey and just unknown to the people of that time. So the gospel spread to the ends of the earth, and then at the same time was able to be enculturated in a way that could take up different languages and could take up some different customs and could incorporate all that was good into the gospel. So a simple principle is that there is nothing that is authentically human So what are things that are not authentically human? Well, like child sacrifice, or other forms of exploitation or enslavement, or the various expressions of sin that also become enculturated in different places. uh, Racism, prejudice, that destroys peoples, that treats some as less having a lower dignity, and deserving of whatever greater suffering or exploitation than others. So all that is authentically human is purified, perfected, and elevated by the gospel, by Jesus Christ, because the Word became flesh. He became genuinely a human being. Jesus is true God and true man. And so he takes on the fullness of our humanity in that sense. He is not simply a cultural Jew who therefore only brought the good news to the Jews, but he is genuinely human. He is a man like us. Every person can say that. And so he brings the gospel to everyone, and elevates, perfects, purifies all humanity. And again, that can be brought into different places. So the singing hymns in English or singing hymns in Italian are two different ways of inculturating the gospel, or in, incorporating some of the in the Eastern rites, some the posture of standing becomes part of the sacramental language to designate reverence, whereas in the West, the posture of kneeling was something that was used to designate reverence before a great figure. So you kneel before Caesar in the West, but you stand in the presence of the emperor in the East. I mean, this kind of thing, that these different postures, there are some things that are a little bit arbitrary in our humanity. The sign of newness and new life in the East being green. Of course, we can get that from the green grass and the green life that comes forth in the spring, and that became a sign of the Holy Spirit. The West focused on the newness, the dynamism of fire, and fire's capacity to light and to warm, and coupled together the image of fire, also drawn from the scriptures, with the Holy Spirit. And so the symbol of the Holy Spirit in the West became red. So anyway, there's some variation according to different cultural foundations, but ultimately the same message and applied to the same end, which is to make everyone holy, to unite everyone with God himself.
And if you think about it, it is something that makes sense, but it's also kind of gives credence to the fact that there's something here. And you see how ultimately, when we try to put people into groups, into categories, based upon various different things, and there's all kinds of different ways that happens in this current world. Um, some people put themselves in a group, some people just want to label another group. But when we look at the fact that the faith isn't really about what you think, or what you believe should be the case. It just deals with what is. This is the way humans are. If you want to live your best life, it's not a book about this is how you should be taxed. This is how you should treat each other. This is how you should be able to have a relationship with each other. And we see how the secular world tries to do grouping the people and the universality of what they try to use there. It involves all this other stuff that just isn't applicable to everyone. While they're trying to create an identity in a group, that really the faith is to me the best way that I've ever seen it done, because it's the only one that works. You can have people from completely different areas, and as you said, get to the same truth, even if it's through different ways. Because at the end of the day, I mean, really, what difference does it matter what color is the background of the flags for the signs of the Spirit for confirmation? If they're on a red font or a green font, that's kind of irrelevant. What is relevant is that you're going to create the courage to follow the faith and to try to fight sin as best as you can, and to teach others that route. And I think that that is the reason is because it calls us to ultimately be better rather than going to the least common denominator and saying, well, everyone does that, so we shouldn't try to push better than it. The church says, no, that's not how you become holy. You have to overcome whatever that sin is. You have to resist lying. You have to not say one thing and then do another. You have to be consistent. You have to be accountable. All of that important stuff that actually calls us to become better and live better lives. That ultimately is how we wish every single one of us and the people around us would live. You know, at the end of the day, it's how we wish someone would treat our kids. Is the way of the Catholic faith. So I wanted to kind of make sure that I was on the same point of where you were getting there and not cutting you off there.
Well, and to your point a little bit earlier, I mean, the race to the bottom, the least common denominator, is ultimately aiming at uniformity rather than unity in diversity, which would be harmony. And the Holy Spirit harmonizes, he doesn't make uniform. And our efforts to push on unity end up in uniformity many times. And the only way we can get to uniformity is, I mean, we can't really. we can't get to uniformity. We can't have everybody with the same sex, the same skin color, the same appearances, the same language, the same. We just can't get there without destroying everything, that race to the bottom, like you said. On the other hand, sometimes there's a push towards diversity that becomes just difference, just pushing towards difference and demanding our right to be different at the cost of truth, just a radical individualization that everybody is absolutely different. And that's not true either. So part of the beauty of seeing Christian faith spread throughout the world is we see there are a number of truths like the green or the red for the Holy Spirit. At some level is trivial, as you say, but there is a real difference between the bringer of life and the fire of love. And it's both. The Holy Spirit is both. And so we unite different things in a single unity, and we have something more beautiful together. And the push toward difference, which creates division, is problematic, as if every different kind is the only kind. And then the push toward uniformity that destroys difference is problematic, because then we reduce to a monoculture. But the reality we experience is really the beauty of difference, mutual understanding, brought together in a complementarity, a communion with each other, and that becomes fruitful. And the icon of that, the fundamental icon of that, is male and female. Male and female are different. That's so non-PC to say these days, but it's just irrational to look at it any other way. Every man knows that every woman is different than him. And if we learn to celebrate that, there's a captivating quality to the other who is different, because there's something that I can't get except through that person. There's a way of living humanity which is alien to me in my own experience, but which I can discover and receive in the experience of a woman, which is fascinating. And a woman experiences the opposite of that, a way of living humanity that is alien to her. And that unity in complementarity begets children. You know, that's where fruitfulness comes from. As much as we can use scientific processes to manipulate those natural processes, ultimately you always need a man and a woman at the end of the day in order to beget new life. It's only the unity in difference, our reproductive systems, which are incomplete on their own. A masculine reproductive system can't be completed without a female reproductive system, ultimately. And so that unity and difference is what begets new life. And so that's where we don't try to reduce men to women or women to men. We don't try, and then that's the icon, that's the irreducible center. But then just to elaborate that out, we don't need to reduce French to Italian or Italian to French. We can have both. We don't need to reduce the different cultural expressions of humanity and reduce them all to one. We can have the variety that's there. but then they can be unified in one faith. And it's an amazing thing. I mean, anybody who has been to some international gatherings has experienced that beauty in difference unified by a single faith. And I know when I've been to World Youth Day, I've had those very spontaneous experiences of, I remember vividly going up an escalator in Madrid in 2011, and there was an Arab man wearing a clerical shirt with a white tab, so clearly a priest, going down the escalator. I doubt we could speak each other's language, but we saw each other. He saw my habit and my beard and other things that designate me as a monk, and knew that I was a Catholic priest. And I saw him as a Catholic priest, and we had an immediate bond. And so there's something unifying about our faith, which is beautiful and amazing. And so we smiled and we waved at each other and we passed each other on the escalator. And then I got into an elevator a little after that, and there were several young adult African women, and I asked them where they were from, and they told me they were from Ethiopia, a place I've never been to. And I said, "Wow, do you celebrate the Coptic rite?" And they said, "Yes." And I said, "Wow, what do you think about our celebration of the Mass and the Roman rite?" I said, "It's a little shorter than what you're used to, huh? Because daily Mass in the Coptic Church is about 3 hours." And so coming to the Pope celebrating Mass, even the longest Mass that we ever experience, about an hour and a half or 2 hours, is still falling short of their normal experience. And they said, "Well, it's beautiful. It's a little short. We just get started praying and it's over, but it's wonderful. We love to be." So we had this immediate bond. We had things that we could talk about, things that we could share of the greatest value, because we share the same faith and the same way of celebrating that faith fundamentally in the Eucharist, although different expressions of that celebration across different cultural areas. But at the center of our faith is Jesus Christ, who is God and man, who is one with us. And so we all worship the same God. And so we all come around the same altar. We all gaze on the same sacrament, and we all love him in our own languages and personal cultural expressions and backgrounds and everything else. But we place him in the center of everything, and find unity with each other at the same time.
You keep using the term celebrate, and this has just been in my head for the last couple of days, and maybe was subconsciously preparing me for this recording. One of the great things about doing the Mass is that every single time it's a renewal of the Final Supper. And one of the things that I was thinking going through my life is I build things. I walk into a house, starts broken, and it's a continual process of got to fix this, got to fix that, got to fix that. And then eventually it's done and you leave and you go somewhere else and you do it. But you don't get that continual, joy of going through it. And I'm going to take something small that I did in my own house. I have always been having a pet peeve of I don't like doors that are halfway closed or halfway open. And one of the things in Pittsburgh that old houses, they tend to like kind of fall somewhere in the middle because the houses settle weird. So I went out, I bought like a $5 thing, $5 worth of work to put a magnetic doorstop on. They'll just keep them open all the time or all the way closed, no middle ground. And I was thinking about, at the time when I did that, how many years ago, it gave me immediate joy that it was there and it got done. But as time had gone on, I just kind of accepted that that's a thing of life. And then a new pet peeve kind of creeps in. And I think that the reason I'm bringing that up now is because I think that that's part of the universality and the Catholic element, that we can keep continuing celebrating this joy at a happiness point, that this is real and we keep going back to the truth of it. So therefore, flaws, as you mentioned before, as terms of any issue that government's trying to push about gender, that doesn't come into play when you're continually going back and experiencing the joy of what this is all about. And you guys, being priests and in religious life in general, have learned that skill of how to truly be joyful And in a sense, this might be the way, the adult way of saying, look at everything through the eyes of a child. That you can have the same story over and over again and still find joy and pleasure from it, and not be just looking to the next problem to fix or the next thing on the schedule. And I wanted to point that out because I think that that's an important skill that is kind of not normally brought up, but I think it's kind of like the mortar to this brick wall in some sense. In terms that we can continually celebrate Jesus because of his teachings, and we don't just go, okay, I'm done with that, time to read a new book. So I want to give you a chance to respond to that as we're kind of concluding to today's episode.
Well, and just to contrast the Holy Mass with magnetic door holders, the Holy Mass is infinitely deep, and Jesus Christ is infinitely deep, and our faith is infinitely deep. And so you can fairly well exhaust a magnetic doorstop, which I think is a really cool idea. I'm glad that you did that. I don't know why nobody else thought of that. That's brilliant. But it's, a fairly limited. Once you get the concept, you go, oh, okay, good. Let's just do that. And there isn't really an infinite depth that's there to explore, which there is in humanity in general. There's we open up into the infinite because God dwells within us and we're made in his image and likeness. So in that sense, there's something that is boundless there that we can go into. But certainly the mystery of God himself. I mean, we can't ever just sort of ho-hum get over the fact that God gives us his entire self in the Eucharist. It's all of eternity contained in that chalice, in that host. And so there's something that we need to keep coming back to again and again. We only get a facet at a time. We just get a drop at a time. And there are oceans and oceans of depths to explore there. So the things that are of greater value, we can repeat, we can return to again and again. And that's just a basic principle. The things that are of less value, it's sort of like you can watch the same movie a number of times. Now, there comes a point of diminishing returns, and the richer the movie, the deeper the meaning, the farther away that point of diminishing returns is. But ultimately, movies are bringing us something, well, predominantly finite. I mean, sometimes opening up into infinite values. And so we're able to appreciate them at a deeper level as we grow throughout life. But for the most part, we exhaust the meaning of those finite things. We never exhaust the meaning of the truth conveyed by Christ or his presence that we celebrate in the Eucharist.
And I think that's the best way to put it there, in that there's never a end point. There's never a we got this. And just as you say that, it just kind of brings so many more questions that come up. And I guess that was one of the things that I had in the back of my mind when I didn't understand the beginning. Like, how are we going to get to 50 episodes? And now we've crossed over 200, and it seems like every single time I'm at Mass, like, comes up with 10 other things for me to talk about, and I have a checklist that's pretty long right here. So with that being said, we thank everyone for listening here today. We will continue to go through our episodes, and we will be with you again next week.